Well, good morning. Thank you very much for joining me in this video. I want to talk to you this morning about the foreign buyer spec tax, or what's more properly known as a non-residential speculation tax, or the NRST. To give you a little bit of background, you can go, those of you who've been in the business for some time may remember the land speculation tax. And back then we were concerned about restricted and non-restricted properties. And restricted properties were properties that were investment, commercial, industrial, businesses, that sort of thing. And non-restricted properties were residential properties. And basically, the government wasn't concerned about foreigners buying housing. They were concerned about foreigners investing in businesses and revenue-producing property. This is the exact reverse of that. Now they're not concerned about foreign investment into businesses, strip plazas, hotels, whatever it might be. They're concerned about foreigners buying housing. And specifically when I'm talking housing, I'm talking smaller units. In other words, what I mean by that isn't the size of the unit, but the one dwelling up to 6 dwellings. If the foreigner is buying a 100-unit apartment building, the government doesn't care. What they want to do is they want to stop inventory that would be available to first-time buyers and Canadians who are looking to own a home and taking that out of inventory because a foreigner owns it. So the speculation tax came in, I think somewhere around 2021. It came in first in BC, where the market was extremely hot with foreign buyers, and then it moved on to Ontario. And the tax originally was 15%, and it applied to property in the Golden Horseshoe or impacted by the Golden Horseshoe. I say that to mean properties, like for example, Barrie was incorporated into that Golden Horseshoe situation when the tax came in. Then on March the 30th, the government increased the tax to 20% and increased the scope of the tax to include all residential properties in the province. And then, of course, you give the government an inch, they take a mile. Along came October the 25th, and it still involves all eligible properties, residential properties in the province of Ontario, but now it's increased to 25%. So who's impacted? Who has to pay this tax? First of all, foreign nationals, but also foreign corporations, and I should add Canadian corporations that are controlled by foreign nationals, and also taxable trustees. And when I speak about trustees, I would say that a trustee who is a trustee for a mutual fund trust, or a trustee that's a trustee for a real estate investment trust, REIT, they are not required to pay the tax. But also exempt are what we call protected persons. What do I mean by a protected person? Well, that comes under the Refugee Protection Act, and we're talking about people who come into Canada as refugees. They are not required to pay the tax if they're acquiring a residential property. Also, nominees under the Ontario Immigration Nominee Program. What do I mean by that? Well, consider a time when Ontario is, let's call it headhunting. They're looking for people who they think really we need in our immigration program. They're talking about people who have a skill set or have experience or have an education that fits the criteria. And if these people want to buy a house, if they're a nominated person, then they're going to be exempt from the tax as well. Also, any person who is a spouse of a Canadian citizen, a permanent resident, a protected person, or a nominee, they're not required to pay the tax. So those are the exemptions we have. But also, you need to understand that the people who pay the tax in certain circumstances are eligible for a rebate. And I say they pay the tax because I want you to understand that at 25%, that's a ton of money, and they have to pay that out. You're buying $1 million residence, that's $250,000 on top as an added tax. That's in addition to the land transfer tax, anything else you have to pay. Okay, so if the foreign national becomes a permanent resident of Canada within 4 years of the purchase, he's eligible to apply for a rebate. Also, if the purchaser is an international student, and that means that sometime within that 4-year period, he enrolls in an eligible Canadian educational institution for a period of 2 years, he is eligible to get the tax back. Also, a worker who works full-time for a period of at least 1 year after acquiring the property, he is eligible for the rebate. How do you qualify for the rebate? One of the things you need to understand is the property that you're buying has to be your principal residence within 60 days of purchase. In other words, you can't purchase a property, rent it out for 6 months, and then decide to move into it. You won't get the rebate. It's got to be your principal residence, and it's got to be declared that way. And a foreign national, when he becomes a permanent resident, he's got to apply within 90 days from the time he becomes a permanent resident. Now, it might be a year and a half from the time he purchases the property, but when he gets his status as a permanent resident, then he's got that 90-day period. And also, an international student, he's got 4 years from the time he pays the tax to make application for the rebate. I hope these things make sense. I hope they help a little bit. It's a little convoluted, I know, with all the deadlines and so on. Yeah, follow them up. Make a note of them from watching this video, and keep this in mind because it will impact. It isn't just a buyer coming in that's buying in Hong Kong and wants to put his money into Canada instead of leaving it in Hong Kong. It also involves somebody in the United States, our southern neighbor, who wants to move up to Canada. They're still a non-resident and they're buying and they're subject to the tax. Hope that makes sense. I want to thank you for investing the time. I look forward to talking to you again next week.